Whenever I can come up with a test, I like to give it, so I'm going to give a test. Spell sun. Spell sun. Spell it another way. Okay, thank you. You all passed. I'm reading a book during this Lent. I'm almost finished. Amazing. I have a good cry. I cried this morning reading it. It's just so powerful. It's called Tattoos on the Heart. Wait, there's a longer name because let me get it here. I'm not reading emails, so don't, Okay, it's called Tattoos on the Heart, the Power of Boundless Compassion. Boundless Compassion. It's by Father Greg Boyle, Jesuit priest who works in Homeboy Industries. An amazing book. And in his 30-year work with gang members, he has come to discover compassion in so many ways, and also darkness and sin, and also redemption and new life. It's an amazing book. It's just miraculous. I really recommend it. It's a great Lent reading, and I'm sure will take you to some places you maybe have never been. Today's scriptures is about sight. It's about darkness, blindness, seeing. It's about the Son of Man. So I got curious, and with the help of my handy computer, first I tried to test myself, and I thought of all the different words that include the word sight. And of course, the big word was insight, seeing in. It's interesting how we flip words, like sight in is insight. Understand is standing under. I don't know if you've ever been to the La Brea tar pits, and they have this thing outside. It's a little artwork. It's a huge boulder, and it stands on this archway, double archway. So you walk under it. You're standing under this, I don't know how many ton boulder. You stand under, and by standing under, you understand how treacherous this would be. Standing under something is coming to understand. So I looked at all the words of sight. Foresight, hindsight. Those are both good, huh? It's not living in the present. Have foresight, hindsight, short-sighted, unsightly, oversight, farsighted, nearsighted. And those are interesting because the only two on here that have to do with actual sight, physical sight, are farsighted and nearsighted. And the funny thing about them is they mean exactly the opposite. I've always been nearsighted, which means I couldn't see far. And those who are farsighted can see far very well, but can't see near. I don't know why it's like that. So insight is really the key to the scriptures today, but it deals with physical sight first, all the readings. First reading, Samuel, prophet, is looking for the king that was going to be the king of Israel, and God sends him to the house of Jesse. He says, "Oh, got all these sons, go to the house of Jesse, and I will point out to you who the new king will be." So he tells this to Jesse. He says, "Can you bring in all your sons, and I'm going to check them out and figure out who's going to be the new king." So he comes in, nope, goes right down the list. Finishes all of his sons, and he hasn't found the king. So he says, "I don't get it. Do you have any other sons?" He says, "Yeah, this little runt, but he's out there taking care of the sheep. You don't want to see him. Bring him in." Wouldn't you know it? It's God's way all the time. He finds the runt that nobody in the family thinks would be the king, and that's the one that God chooses. Now, there's a great lesson in this. Here's the insight of this story. I'll bet you that the part that God is going to find in us is the sin, the narrowness, the stubbornness, the ugliness, because that's where I bet there are hidden treasures in us. And if we were willing to expose them to God, open them to God, invite God into them, maybe like David, the little runt that no one believed in, that would become the kingly part of us. Just a thought. Second reading, Paul is inviting us to consider Christ, the light of the world, comes to dispel darkness, to take away the darkness, because that's what light does. In this book, Tattoos on the Heart, there's this beautiful story, there's so many stories in it, of this man, young, about 30, I think, who was hopelessly addicted to drugs, alcohol too, I think. And every time that Father Greg Boyle would see him, he'd say, well, you ready for rehab yet? No, Father, thank you, thanks for the invite. He was always polite to Father Greg, but he just turned him down every time. He wasn't interested. So finally, and I forget the reason, but he decides to go into rehab. He comes to Father Greg's office and says, I'm ready. Take me to rehab. So he does. I think it's a 45-day program. He goes to it. While he's in the program, his younger brother, who also is hopelessly addicted to drugs, gets shot and killed. Gang stuff. So Father Greg knows he has to go to the rehab program to tell him, also to get him out for a day to go to the funeral and take him back. So it's all set up. So he gets there. And he says to him, I think his name is Pedro, but he says, Pedro, I'll only take you to this funeral on one condition, that you come back. He says, don't worry about it, Father. He says, I'm already committed. I have seen the light. I know what I'm doing, and this is what I want. So he gets in the car, and they're on their way to the funeral, and Father Greg says, in his mind, he's saying, what am I going to talk about? Anything is superficial today. I don't have anything to say to him. So Pedro starts the conversation. He says, you know what? He called him G, dog, I think. He says, I dreamt about you last night. He says, really? He says, yeah, I was in this dark room, couldn't see anything, and I knew you were there, but you hadn't spoken. I just knew you were there. And then in total darkness, you reach into your pocket and pull out a tiny little flashlight, and you flick it on, and I know it's you doing this, though not a word was said, and all you do with that light is you've shined it on the switch, the light switch in the room. And in a moment, I had the insight to know that I was the only one who could turn that switch on and find the light. And he said, that's why I knew that what I'm doing right now is the right thing. And he was totally broken up by his brother's death, but he knew he could not go back, that the light had already shone in his heart, in his life. That's insight. So we come to this gospel. It's such an interesting gospel. It's the only one in all of the gospels that's told in this way. And it's interesting because it's the only gospel that I'm aware of where somebody is born blind, and the gospel makes a point of that. Oh, blind people have been cured before, but nobody has ever even heard of a person born blind being healed, getting his sight. Not getting it back, but getting sight for the first time. This is a grown man spending his whole life begging. And one of the interesting things about this story is almost every healing story, the person who wants healing approaches Jesus and asks for something. And then Jesus almost always says, what do you want? Now, a blind man comes before Jesus like this, and he says, Jesus, have pity on me, have pity. So Jesus says, what do you want? Duh. I want to see. But he insists that the person ask for it. Because we need to know what we need. We need to struggle with finding out what we need in life, if you will, where we're blind. But in this story, he doesn't ask. The man doesn't ask, nor does Jesus offer. He doesn't ask him by saying, well, what do you want? How can I help you? What happens is they're just walking down the road and they see the blind man, and this conversation pops up. The disciples say, well, Jesus, what do you think? Is he blind, born blind because of his sin or his parents' sins? The Jews believed if you were born like that, it had to be someone's fault, either your parents or yourself. It's kind of like drug babies. You know, if a baby comes out addicted, you can say, well, who's the sinner? Well, it's the parent. Hello, taking drugs. So, who's the sinner? Is it the parents or him? Jesus said neither one. Neither one. And then without asking, and the man wasn't asking, he was just doing his begging. He didn't even know what was going on. Maybe he overheard the conversation, it doesn't say. But Jesus just goes over and spits on the ground, mixes the ground with the spit, rubs it on his eyes, doesn't ask him, puts it on his eyes, says, now go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. And he does. And he comes back seeing. Now, he doesn't go to Jesus, but he's accosted by the Pharisees who hear or saw what happened, and already they are opposed to Jesus because he did it on the Sabbath. So, now talk about, not being able to see. Oh, of course, they could see with their eyes what he just did, but with the insight of this is, well, he did it on the Sabbath. Well, why wouldn't he? What could be more loving than to heal someone? And he didn't go through much action at all, just go wash yourself. It's one of those healing stories that has practically no drama attached to it. So they go back and forth. Well, who did this to you? Well, it was this Jesus. Well, he must be a sinner. He did on the Sabbath. No. I say he's a prophet. Who are you to say he's a prophet? Get out of this temple. Get out. So he goes. Now, it gets better. It gets better. Jesus healed a blind man, gave him sight. When he finds out that he's been thrown out of the temple because he spoke up on his behalf, Jesus went and found him. Now, to find him, to go and find him, means he was searching for him. He searched for him, he found him, and then he begins this conversation. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Well, I would, sir, if I knew who he was. I don't know who he is. I don't know. And he says, well, you're talking to him. And Jesus opens his inner eye, the eye of faith. And a man who had no idea, I don't know who he is, came to believe him at the invitation of Jesus. He saw him now. And what did he do? It says, after he professed his faith, what did he do? I'll give you a hint. It starts with he, and it ends with him. He starts with a W. Worshipped him. Another test. Who is the only one that we worship? God. So this is John's way of saying he recognized him. He recognized him. He saw him with insight and said, he's the Messiah. He's the Messiah. He is the Christ of God. Amazing story. Let's go home. Not yet. Because we have to ask ourselves, what's this gospel mean to us? Why do we hear it in Lent? Why do we insist, even though we could be on cycle B and C when we don't have this gospel, when we have catechumens as we did at the last Mass and we'll have at the next Mass, we have to use this every year. So every church that has catechumens, every single year uses the A cycle at the Mass of the catechumens. The next year we'll use B and C at all the other Masses. We have a group that will hear this next year. Why? Because we are looking for the miracle of insight, all of us. As the second reading suggested, there's darkness all around us, not just because at night it's dark, but because it's dark until we have the light, the S-U-N. I've often wondered, why do they call the sun, the one up in the heavens there, S-U-N? Where did sun and sun happen? Why? And I don't know, but it makes me wonder if early on there was some connection between sun, the Son of Man, and the sun, both of them bringing light into the world. I have no idea, so I'm giving this to you to research it. You Google it, and you come back and report to me. It probably comes from a Greek word anyway, whatever. But it doesn't matter. I'm choosing to see a connection here because the sun is the biggest giver of light to us on the earth. But the sun is also the biggest giver of life inside us. And anywhere the sun shines, the darkness is taken away. But what if we choose blindness? What if we come right here into the presence of the Son of God and we're to choose blindness instead? So I'll give you a good example. Father Perry just received communion so beautifully. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is in his heart. He comes back, says his beautiful prayers. I love you. I love you. Oh, God, I love you. And then I think, Would you get out of my way? You walked right in front of me. Blind. I went from worship of the Son of God, all this light shining in my heart and soul, and I choose blindness. And just to be certain, we all do it. And we all do it every day. I am quite sure not one of us survives a day ever without a little blindness peeking in. Impatience, attitude, and even the one who looks just perfect and shows no signs of inner darkness, we all got attitude, please. That we don't like things, we draw judgments. It is so hard when you hear chisme not to suck it up and believe it and spread it. We just do it. Some of it is really bad stuff. And most of us, thank you God, are relieved of that, or we never find that kind of darkness. We don't go out and kill. Is anybody planning on robbing a bank today? Anybody? Nah. This isn't the crowd of bank robbers. However, did you hear this one? The man that came up with a brilliant thing, he hacked into a bank, and this is what he took, a penny from every single account. And I don't know if it was daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever, but can you imagine? From every single account, he took a penny, and he made a lot of money. And you know how he got caught? He was in it with another friend who thought a penny was too little, so he took 10 cents, and that got seen. The other was practically invisible. Greed, that'll get you. So the big question in this Lent is, on Leiker Sunday, rejoice, we're almost done. Are we? Why don't we take a good look? Where are we blind? What darkness pinches our lives? Where do we not see? Where do we see, but then we go blind? Jesus says, I'm the light, I'll come. Those who are blind will see, but those who see, they'll go blind. Because I'll tell you, if you look up at the sun, you'll go blind. Don't do it. Children, raise your hand, all the children. Hear me and hear me clearly. Never look at the sun up in the sky, ever, ever, ever. Because you don't even know the damage that will happen to your eyes. You won't see it right then. You won't see later. Never look at the sun. But if we look at the Son of God very clearly, and if we know we're blind and we say, Lord, I want to see. Insight, I want to see. And if we know what our blindnesses are, our attitudes, it survives into some adults, but children are the best at this attitude. Parents see it, teachers see it. And tell me, you guys, if I'm wrong. The teacher or the parent says something, and this is the attitude that we see. Don't say we're just roll those eyes. My sister had 7 girls. She said, don't you roll those eyes. You unroll those eyes. Don't roll those eyes. And although it's not a big thing, it reveals the inner attitude, the attitude. And it isn't one of gratitude. It's just bad attitude. So we check out our blindness right in the middle of Lent, right on Leiker Sunday, and ask ourselves, how can we find some sight, some insight? And the way the gospel says it is, we come before Jesus and we let him in. We ask him in. We tell him how we want to grow. We're not afraid to check out our darkness. We're not afraid to admit our sin. We're not afraid to say, I want more out of life for me. And in that attitude, in that openness, we come to see the light, and the light reveals everything.